Now, it is no secret that one of the biggest issues today we face is the loss of trust in governments, in people, and in institutions. So now we will spend some time attempting to tackle this challenge, and thankfully, we are joined by Terrence Smith, Public Innovation Fellow at the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation at Johns Hopkins, who has done a lot of field work on how we can regain and rebuild that trust. Welcome, Terrence.
Good morning. So we're going to tackle the topic of trust in 8 minutes. I am a true Southerner, so this is going to be a great challenge for me. Bear with me. So, as you've heard, I am a Bloomberg Public Innovation Fellow at the Center for Public Innovation at Johns Hopkins. But I started my career off designing schools for at-risk students. Then moving on to the government to understand how do I get people who are supposed to work together to actually work together to tackle tough issues. The success of all that, though, led me back to this understanding that the people that I admired, who did really good work, were able to engender the levels of trust needed to be successful. How do we get people to do tough things? How do we get people to take risk? How do we get them to be vulnerable, to venture off into uncharted territory when they're not incentivized to do so, right? Most of these people have been incentivized to do things a certain way for so long that it becomes very natural and ingrained and embedded. So, are you ready? We're going to talk about this. I started out thinking about, in my journey of this public innovation fellowship, I wanted to understand who were the people who really did well in engendering trust, and where were they? So I went to Finland and Denmark, people who had the greatest, highest levels of trust, over to Barranquilla, Colombia, 14 other cities across the U.S., and ending in Mobile, Alabama, which is the home of the last known slave ship in America, right? So you can imagine that dynamic and crossing that. What I've learned is that people want to live in just, fair, and caring societies. What does that mean? Especially when we talk about caring in government and caring in public institutions. What does that mean? That means, starting with one, is that they want us to be able to value the lived experiences of those who are closest to the problem. Two is that they want us to be able to show how much we care through our actions, through how we listen and observe, how we show that we're assuming responsibility for the things that we control. How then do we show our level of competency to actually solve the problems? How are we showing our level of responsiveness to when we start something and it doesn't quite hit the mark? And then how then do we take all that to the top to collaborate? This other part, though, is this fairness piece, and how are we showing that we're fair in our resource and our information distribution, but the systems and the processes that we create. So I'm going to talk about this, right? As we talk about trust, and I tackled this issue of trust, and people said, it's going to be so difficult, don't do it, don't waste your 2 years tackling this trust issue. But I realized that we spoke a lot about how difficult it is to create trust and engender trust. And we fell into this narrative of believing that it is too hard to tackle. Well, maybe. So journey with me a little bit, right? There's trust, and then there's trustworthiness. And I felt that in the research and literature and in our practice, we didn't speak enough about trustworthiness. I may not be able to get you to trust me based on what I'm saying, but I can impact my own trustworthiness, which is the ability, humanity, and integrity. People are asking themselves 3 questions when they're wondering if they can trust you or your organization, and that is, can you do what you say you're going to do? Can you do that without causing harm? Can you do that without me having to look over your shoulders every 5 minutes, right? If you answer those 3 questions for people, then they're more likely to trust you. They're more likely to be vulnerable and take risk and do things that they normally would not have done, right? What does this mean for us, right? It means that trust is a dynamic to be managed, and we all have a collective responsibility to actually manage that trustworthiness. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, in the time that I have left, though, is this fascinating journey that I've been on across the globe to understand trust and how it's built and how it's engendered, and the focus on our levels of trustworthiness, right? I went from thinking that trust was a flat continuum based on the existing research. And then I realized, wait a minute, it's not really a flat continuum. It's not that we should go to the highest level of trust we can in order to have the greatest level of collaboration or stay away from this lowest level of trust, it's really a quadrant, right? And I'm going to give you a visual. So imagine this flat line moving into a 180-degree angle, 180-degree circumference, right? And so now we're thinking about the fact that in this very center section, this healthy trust, it says that I trust you, but I'm going to verify, and I trust you enough because I feel like you've been consistent and your information is fair, just, and caring. That's the center section. On this first third of the wheel, you have this low level of trust, which is categorized with there's a lack of trust, a loss of trust, skepticism, and then cynicism. And cynicism is what we often think about when we think about this low levels of trust, right? It says that not only do I not trust you, I'm going to go on a campaign to talk to anybody I can to prevent them from trusting you because I have reason to believe that you are going to use your powers to harm me. Now, this really fascinating side, though, is this complete trust realm. It's when we move outside of this zone of healthy trust, we move into this area where it says, I trust you so much that I don't want to be vulnerable enough to speak my point of view, which means that I'm now going to be less risk averse to step out and exhibit some non-normative behavior from pushing on you, which leads me into groupthink where it says there's strength in numbers. I'm not going to say what I truly believe. I'm just going to believe that this person is telling me the truth. We're going to follow it. And then we fall into this zone of absolute trust where no matter what you say, I am going to go with this person because that person's in control and we trust that trust is there. And even when it's not there, I believe that this person is not operating in bad faith. And so when we think about this, we go back to this point that I mentioned earlier, that trust itself is a dynamic to be measured. I am not here to prescribe ways to actually build trust tactically. I'm here to give you a new framework and a new way of understanding that we could spend time focusing on how do we get people to trust us through the marketing campaigns and all those other novel ideas, or we can change and focus on the things that we control, our own trustworthiness, the ability, the humanity, and the integrity, which tells us that, hey, I am going to prevent it. I am going to present the evidence and the narratives of that I can do what I say I'm going to do, that I can do it without causing harm, and that I can do it without you watching over my shoulders. Lastly, I'm going to leave you with something. In government and our public institutions, we highly focus and favor the people who have high levels of ability, right? And they go in and they achieve a goal, and we hold them up, we give them a gold star, and we promote them to the point of their incompetence, right? However, this is not war. We have to prioritize this level of humanity and this level of integrity because we're not recycling. We're not just cycling through people. We have to recycle these people. We have to come back to them in order to sustain any movement that we have. So I'm going to leave you with this. Trust is a dynamic to be measured, to be managed, and it is all of our collective responsibility to ensure that we're doing this in the right way. How do we do it? By ensuring that we're presenting evidence of our ability, our humanity, and our integrity. Thank you.